So this is just going to be a quick video explaining what's going on with for people that are stuck in hammer mode after they change out their truck. This applies to the DCD996 and 998. It'll apply to basically any Dewalt drill whose internals look like this. So what's happening is when you remove the existing chuck by driving this shaft out, it strips this gear off right here. This is one of the hammer anvil mating teeth sets. So there's another mating gear inside of this clutch body. And what happens is when you drive this off, this gear obviously won't fit through this opening, so it pushes it off of this shaft. When you go to put it back together, the shaft goes through this gear, but it's no longer spaced correctly. And now your issue is that these teeth on this gear were always made up with the teeth in this gear, and that's what causes that hammer action. So unfortunately, the only way to get this gear back where it belongs is to take everything apart all over again. You have to remove the chuck from the input shaft, and inside of this clutch body you'll have to take off this top piece here. There'll be 3 screws in the top of this. You'll have to take that off, and this part will slide off as one piece. Try to keep those together because these springs will want to pop off if you don't. So you can just kind of slide off. Once you take the 3 screws out of the top of this, you can slide that whole assembly off by grabbing this piece and sliding forward while holding this piece in. Anyways, so what you'll see when you take that out is it'll look like this doesn't exist, and you won't see any of these other pieces, because what's going on is there will be a bearing sitting in the top of this that this shaft will ride in, and that bearing is actually this white circle. That's what that bearing is supposed to be. You can see it here. So that's what you'll see is this bearing from the top. You have to take that bearing out. There will be this spring under it. It's not under a ton of pressure or anything, so you don't have to worry about it like flying out and hit you in the face or anything. But that spring will come out too, and then under that spring you'll see what looks like the bottom of what you would think would be the bottom of this container, but it's actually, what you're seeing is this gear, and this whole shaft will slide out of it easily because it's not mated correctly. So the next step is that you have to you can use whatever tool you want, just kind of something small with a hook or whatever to extract this gear from this clutch body. And then under that you'll see what's called the wavy washer, which is this piece. You'll take that out too, and you'll take this gear out too as well. So this gear on the face of it will look just like this. It'll have teeth like this, but these little prongs you'll see inside of this body are just there to make sure it sits in there where it's supposed to. But they're like retention markers or whatever you want to call it. So the only part you need to be really careful about is we have to now drive this gear that we got off back down this shaft, because if you just try to slide it on here, it's going to stop about here, and you'll have this gap between where it's supposed to be and where it is. It'll be really obvious when you look at it. You'll see that this is a lot wider than this part of the shaft, so you have to drive it all the way down to here. So what I did was, to get it started, was I lined it up on the shaft about as perfectly as I could, and then I drilled a hole through a 2x4 that was a little bit bigger than the shaft, but significantly smaller than this gear. And because this gear is such hard, I don't know what kind of steel it is, but it's incredibly hard steel, it's not going to get damaged by the wood. And I tapped it on as far as I could get it to go. So just started out with really light taps. So this, pointed down, this is going down through the hole in the wood. This is where you're tapping. Just light taps to get that started. And it'll seat itself down on there some, then, tapping harder and harder over time. Make sure you're burying in this springer on there before you start doing that though. Because otherwise I don't know how to get this off of there besides, doing the process all over again. But once you get it, you feel like it's not moving farther anymore. What I did was I went and, because what's happening is you're running into the fact that like the amount of pressure it takes, the wood's going to give before it's going to move it up further. So I grabbed this gear right here, and I put that on top of a nut that, again, the hole in the nut is bigger than the shaft, but smaller than the, gear. And then I made sure that the teeth from this one and the teeth from this one lined up perfectly. So you're going to kind of twist it and they'll lock. You'll feel it lock. And I made sure that was all set down, and I kind of twisted until it locked perfectly. And then I held that in place once I had that lock. And now you can again start striking the top of this until it drives all the way up. Now, as long as you have those teeth mated against each other, you shouldn't have any issues of deformation or anything, because those teeth are designed, to mate up. So you're not going to have any sharp points of impact to where it's going to deform. Plus, again, I have no idea what this metal is, but I'm guarantee you it's insanely hard considering its function and what it's supposed to do. And it's obviously going to be resistant to impact, again, because of its function and what it's supposed to do. So once you have that done and it's driven all the way up, and again, I said you'll see like it's very obvious that this is a lot wider than this. You'll drive this all the way up. You'll have that assembly ready. So now you need to reassemble all of this again. So this has to go on the bottom first, and then this wavy washer will go on top. It'll be fairly evident like how that wavy washer fits on there. You can't really put it in wrong. And then you will slide that shaft down and then, down into that hole. And then you can slide this body, that we took off earlier back down and put the screws back in to hold it back down to this. The next step, is to just put the chuck on. And what I did to test it was I just spun the chuck on by hand about as tight as I could get it. And then I, put it in forward gear after I, reassembled everything else. I left it with, just this spindle sticking out, and I put the rest of the drill back together, spun the chuck on by hand, and then, I'm sure you all know this, but if you press in and on the chuck body into the drill, that's when you would see, your issue. And that was because the teeth from this and the teeth from that were mating up. You shouldn't see that or hear that anymore. I would let it spin freely first before you push on it for the first time, stop and push it, but you shouldn't hear that anymore. And then, once you're done, you can follow the normal instructions about putting the new chuck head on. I'm not a professional YouTuber by any stretch. I just know how frustrating this was, so I'm really hoping that it can help someone else that ran into the same problem. And I want to thank, I can't remember his name. I want to thank Nose because without his original video, I wouldn't have probably had the guts to get down to this part in the first place. So big shout out to him for getting me that far, but hopefully this can help you, and hopefully this fix works for all of you. Thanks.